Hi, my name is Gavin, and today I'll be reading you guys the first book of Percy Jackson. In each chapter, I will be teaching you guys an element of the book. So, the first chapter, I accidentally vaporized my math teacher. Look, I didn't want to be a half blood. If you're reading this because you might be one, my advice is close this book right now. Believe whatever lie your mom or dad told you about your birth and try to lead a normal life. Being a half blood is dangerous. It's scary. Most of the time, it gets you killed in painful, nasty ways. If you're a normal kid reading this because you think it's fiction, great. Read on. I envy you for being able to believe that none of this ever happened. But if you recognize yourself in these pages, if you feel something stirring inside, stop reading immediately. You might be one of us. And once you know that, it's only a matter of time before they sense it too, and they'll come for you. Don't say I didn't warn you. My name is Percy Jackson. I'm 12 years old. Until a few months ago, I was a boarding student at Yancey Academy, a private school for troubled kids in upstate New York. Am I a troubled kid? Yeah, you could say that. I could start at any point in my short, miserable life to prove it. But things really started going bad last May when our sixth grade class took a field trip to Manhattan. 20 mental case kids and two teachers on a yellow school bus headed to the Metropolitan Museum of Art to look at ancient Greek and Roman stuff. I know, it sounds like torture. Most Yancey field trips were, but Mr. Bruner, our Latin teacher, was leading this trip, so I had hopes. Mr. Bruner was this middle aged guy in a motorized wheelchair. He had thinning hair and a scruffing beard and a frayed tweed jacket, which always smelled like coffee. You wouldn't think he'd be so cool, but he told stories and jokes and let us play games in class. He also had this awesome collection of Roman armor and weapons, so he was the only teacher whose class that didn't put me to sleep. I hoped the trip would be okay. At least I hoped that for once I wouldn't get in trouble. Boy, I was wrong. See, bad things happened to me on a field trip. Like at my fifth grade school, when we went to the Saratoga battlefield, I had this accident with the Revolutionary War cannon. I wasn't aiming for the school bus, but of course I got expelled anyways. And before that, at my fourth grade school, when we took a behind the scenes tour of the Marine World Shark Pool, I sort of hit the wrong lever on the catwalk, and our class took an unplanned swim. And the time before that, well, you get the idea. This trip, I was determined to be good. On the way into the city, I put up with Nancy Bobofit, the freckly, red-headed, kleptomatic girl, hitting my best friend Grover in the back of the head with chunks of peanut butter and ketchup sandwich. Grover was an easy target. He was scrawny. He cried when he got frustrated. He must have been held back several grades because he was the only sixth grader with acne and the start of a wispy beard on his chin. On top of all that, he was crippled. He had a note excusing him from PE for the rest of his life because he had some kind of muscular disease in his legs. He walked funny, like every step hurt him. But don't let that fool you. You should have seen him when it was enchilada day in the cafeteria. Anyway, Nancy Baba Fett was throwing wads of sandwich that stuck in his curly brown hair, and she knew I couldn't do anything back to her because I was already on probation. The headmaster had threatened me with death by in-school suspension if anything bad, embarrassing, or even mildly entertaining happened on this trip. I'm going to kill her, I mumbled. Grover tried to calm me down. It's okay. I like peanut butter. He dodged another piece of Nancy's sandwich. That's it. I started to get up, but pulled me back to my seat. You're already on probation, he reminded me. You know who'll get blamed if anything happens. Looking back on it, I wish I'd decked Nancy Bobbit fit right there and then. In school, suspension would have been nothing compared to the mess I was about to get myself into. Mr. Brunner led the museum tour. He rode up in front of his wheelchair, guiding us through the big, echoey galleries, past marble statues and glass cases full of really old black and orange pottery. It blew my mind that this stuff has survived for 2,000, 3,000 years. He gathered us around the 4-meter tall stone column with a big sphinx on top and started telling us how it was a grave marker, a stele, for a girl about our age. He told us about the carvings on the side. I was trying to listen to what he had to say, but because it was kind of interesting. But everybody around me was talking, and every time I told him to shut up, the other teacher chaperone, Miss Dodds, would give me the evil eye. Miss Dodds was this little math teacher from Georgia who always wore a black leather jacket, even though she was 50 years old. She looked mean enough to write a Harley right into your locker. She had come to Yancey halfway through the year when our last math teacher had a nervous breakdown. From her first day, Miss Dodds loved Nancy Baba Fit and figured I was devil spawn. She would point her crooked finger at me and say, "Now, honey," real sweet, and I knew I was going to get after school detention for a month. One time, after she made me erase answers out of old math workbooks until midnight, I told Grover that I didn't think Miss Dodds was human. He looked at me real serious and said, "You're absolutely right." Mr. Brunner kept talking about Greek funeral art. Finally, Nancy Bobafet snickered something and the naked guy on the stele, and I turned around and said, "Will you shut up?" It came out louder than I meant to. The whole group laughed. Mr. Brunner stopped his story. "Mr. Jackson," he said, "did you have a comment?" My face was totally red. I said, "No, sir." Mr. Bruno pointed to one of the pictures on the stele. "Perhaps you'll tell us what this picture means." I looked at the carving and felt a flush of relief because I actually recognized it. "That's Kronos eating his kids, right?" "Yes," Mr. Bruner said, obviously not satisfied. "And he did this because?" Well, I racked my brain to remember. Kronos was the king god, and God, Mr. Bruner asked. Titan, I corrected myself. And he didn't trust his kids, who were the gods. So, Cronus ate them, right? But his wife hid baby Zeus. It gave Cronus a rock to eat instead. And later, when Zeus grew up, he tricked his dad, Cronos, into barfing up his brothers and sisters. Ew, said one of the girls behind me. And so there was this big fight between the gods and titans. I continued, and the gods won. Some snickers from the group. Behind me, Nancy Boba Fett mumbled to a friend, like we're gonna use this in real life. Like it's gonna say on our job application, please explain why Kronos ate his kids. And why, Mr. Jackson, Bruner said, to paraphrase Miss Boba Fett's excellent questions, does this matter in real life? Busted, Grover muttered. Shut up, Nancy hissed, her face even brighter red than her hair. At least Nancy got in trouble. Mr. Brunner was the only one who ever caught her saying anything wrong. He had radar ears. I thought about his question and shrugged. I don't know, sir. I see. Mr. Brunner looked disappointed. Well, half credit, Mr. Jackson. Zeus did indeed feed Cronus a mixture of mustard and wine, which made him disgorge his other five children, who, of course, being immortal gods, had been living and growing up completely undigested in his Titan's stomach. The gods defeated their father, sliced him to pieces with his own scythe, and scattered his remains in Tartarus, the darkest part of the underworld. On that happy note, it's time for lunch. Miss Dodds, would you lead us back outside? The class drifted out, the girls holding their stomachs, the guys pushing each other and acting like doofuses. Grover and I were about to follow when Mr. Brunner said, "Mr. Jackson." I knew that was coming. I told Grover to keep going, then I turned towards Mr. Brunner. "Sir?" Mr. Brunner had this look that wouldn't let you go. Intense brown eyes that could have been 1,000 years old and had seen everything. "You must learn the answer to my question," Mr. Brunner told me. "About the Titans?" "About real life, and how your studies apply to it." "Oh, what you learn from me," he said, "is vitally important. I expect you to treat it as such. I will only accept the best from you, Percy Jackson." I wanted to get angry. This guy pushed me so hard. I mean, sure, it was kind of cool on tournament days when he dressed up in a suit of Roman armor and shouted, "What ho!" and challenged us, sword point against chop, to run to the board and name every Greek and Roman person who had ever lived, and their mother, and what god they worshipped. But Mr. Brunner expected me to be as good as everyone else, despite the fact that I have dyslexia and attention deficient disorder, and I never made above a C minus in my life. No, he didn't expect me to be as good. He expected me to be better. I just couldn't learn all those names and facts, much less spell them correctly. I mumbled something about trying harder, while Mr. Brunner took one long, sad look at the stele, like he's been at this girl's funeral. He told me to go outside and eat my lunch. The class gathered on the front steps of the museum where we could watch the foot traffic along 5th Avenue. Overhead, a huge storm was brewing, with clouds blacker than I've ever seen over the city. I figured maybe it was global warming or something because the weather all over New York State has been weird since Christmas. We had massive snowstorms, flooding, wildlife from lightning strikes. I wouldn't have been surprised if this was a hurricane blowing in. Nobody else seemed to notice. Some of the guys were pelting pigeons with Lunchable crackers. Nancy Bobbitt was trying to pickpocket something from a lady's bag, and of course, Miss Dodds wasn't seeing a thing. Grover and I sat on the edge of the fountain away from others. We thought that maybe if we did that, everybody wouldn't know we were from that school. The school is for loser freaks who couldn't make it elsewhere. Detention? Grover said. Nah, I said. Not from Brunner. I just wish he'd lay off me sometimes. I mean, I'm not a genius. Grover didn't say anything for a while. Then, when I thought he was going to give me some deep physiological comment to make me feel better, he said, "Can I have your apple?" I didn't have much of an appetite, so I let him take it. I watched a stream of cabs going down from Fifth Avenue and thought about my mom's apartment, only a little ways uptown from where we sat. I hadn't seen her since Christmas. I wanted so bad to jump in a taxi and head home. She'd hug me and be glad to see me, but she'd be disappointed too. She sent me right back to Yancey, remind me that I had to try harder. Even if this was my sixth school in 6 years, I was probably going to be kicked out again. I wouldn't be able to stand that sad look she gave me. Mr. Brunner parked his wheelchair at the base of the handicapped ramp. He ate celery while he read a paperback novel. A red umbrella stuck up from the back of his chair, making it look like a motorized cafe table. I was about to unwrap my sandwich when Nancy Bobblehead appeared in front of me with her ugly friends. I guess she got them tired of stealing from tourists and dumped her half-eaten lunch in Grover's lap. Oops, she grinned at me with her crooked teeth. Her freckles were orange as if someone had spray painted her face with liquid Cheetos. I tried to stay cool. The school counselor had told me a million times, count to 10, get control of your anger. But I was so mad my mind went blank. A wave roared in my ears. I don't remember touching her, but the next thing I knew, Nancy was sitting on her butt in the fountain, screaming, "Percy pushed me." Miss Dodds materialized next to us. Some of the kids were whispering, "Did you see? The water." Like it grabbed her. I didn't know what they were talking about. All I knew that I was in trouble again. As soon as Miss Dodds was sure poor little Nancy was okay, promising to get her a new shirt at the museum gift shop, etc., etc., Miss Dodds turned on me. There was a triumphant fire in her eyes, as if I've done something she'd been waiting for all semester. "Now, honey." "I know," I grumbled. "A month erasing textbooks." That wasn't the right thing to say. "Come with me," Miss Dodson. "Wait," Grover yelled. "It was me. I pushed her." I stared at him stunned. I couldn't believe he was trying to cover for me. Miss Dodds glared Grover to death. She glared at him so hard his whiskery chin trembled. "I don't think so, Mr. Underwood," she said, "but you will stay here." Grover looked at me desperately. "It's okay, man," I told him. "Thanks for trying." "Honey," Miss Dodds barked at me. "Now." Nancy Bobbitt smirked. I gave her my deluxe "I'll kill you" stare. I then turned and faced Miss Dodd, but she wasn't there. She was standing at the museum entrance way at the top of the steps, gesturing impatiently at me to come on. How'd she get there so fast? I have months like that, when my brains fall asleep or something. Then the next thing I've known, I missed something, as if a puzzle piece fell out of the universe and left me staring at the blank place behind it. The school counselor told me this was part of the ADHD. My brain misinterpreting things. I wasn't so sure. I went after Miss Dodds, halfway up the steps. I glanced back at Grover. He was looking pale, cutting his eyes between me and Mr. Brunner, like he wanted Mr. Brunner to know what was going on. But Mr. Brunner was absorbed in his novel. I looked back up. Miss Dodds had disappeared again. She was now inside the building at the end of the entrance hall. Okay, I thought. She's going to make me buy a new shirt for Nancy at the gift shop. But apparently that wasn't a plan. I followed her deeper into the museum. When I finally caught up to her, we were back in the Greek and Roman section, except for us. The gallery was empty. Miss Dodds stood with her arms crossed in front of a big marble frieze of the Greek gods. She was making this weird noise in her throat, like growling. Even without the noise, I would have been nervous. It's weird being alone with the teacher, especially Miss Dodds. Something about the way she looked at the frieze, as if she wanted to pulverize it. "You've been giving us problems, honey," she said. I did the safe thing. I said, "Yes, ma'am." She tugged on the cuffs of her leather jacket. "Did you really think you would get away with it?" The look in her eyes were beyond mad. It was evil. She's a teacher, I thought nervously. It's not like she's gonna hurt me. I said, I'll try harder, ma'am. Thunder shook the buildings. We are not fools, Percy Jackson, Miss Dodd said. It was only a matter of time before found you out. Confess, and you will suffer less pain. I didn't know what she was talking about. All I could think was the teachers must have found the illegal stash of candy I've been selling out in my dorm room. Or maybe they realized I got my essay on Tom Sawyer from the internet without ever reading the book, and now they were going to take away my grade. Or worse, they were going to make me read the book. Well, she demanded. Ma'am, I don't. Your time is up, she hissed. Then the weirdest thing happened. Her eyes began to glow like barbecue coals. Her fingers stretched, turned into her talons. Her jacket melted into large, leathery wings. She wasn't human. She was a shriveled hag with bat wings and claws and a mouth full of yellow fangs, and she was about to slice me to ribbons. Things even got stranger. Mr. Brunner, who had been out in the museum a minute ago, wheeled his chair into the doorway of the gallery, holding a pen in his hand. What ho, Percy, he shouted, and tossed the pen towards the air. Dodge lunged at me. With a yelp, I dodged and felt talons slash the air next to my ear. I snatched a ballpoint pen out of the air, but when it hit my hand, it wasn't a pen anymore. It was a sword. Mr. Brunner's bronze sword, which he always used on tournament day. Miss Dodd spun toward me with a murderous look in her eyes. My knees were jelly. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the sword. She snarled, Die, honey. And she flew straight at me. Absolute terror ran through my body. I did the only thing that came naturally. I swung the sword. The metal blade hit her shoulder and passed clean through her body as if she were made of water. Hiss! Miss Dodds was a sandcastle and a power fan. She exploded into yellow powder, vaporized on the spot, leaving nothing but the smell of sulfur and a dying screech and a chill of evil in the air, as if those two glowing red eyes were still watching me. I was alone. There was a ballpoint pen in my hand. Mr. Brunner wasn't there. Nobody was there but me. My hands were still trembling. My lunch must have been contaminated with magic mushrooms or something. Had I imagined the whole thing? I went back inside. It had started to rain. Grover was sitting by the fountain, a museum map tented over his head. Nancy Bobahip, who was still standing there, soaked from her swim in the fountain, grumbled to her ugly friends. When she saw me, she said, I hope Miss Kerr whipped your butt. I said, Who? Our teacher. Duh. I blinked. We had no teacher named Miss Kerr. I asked Nancy what she was talking about. She just rolled her eyes and turned away. I asked Grover where Miss Dodds was. He said, Who? But he paused and he wouldn't look at me, so I thought he was messing with me. Not funny, man, I told him. This is serious. Thunder boomed ahead. I saw Mr. Brunner sitting under his red umbrella, reading his book as if he never moved. I went over to him. He looked up, a little distracted. Ah, that would be my pen. Please bring your own writing utensil in the future, Mr. Jackson. I handed it over. I haven't even realized I was still holding it. Sir, I said, where's Miss Dodds? He stared at me blankly. Who? The other chaperone, Miss Dodds, the math teacher. He frowned and sat forward, looking mildly concerned. Percy, there is no Miss Dodds on the trip. As far as I know, there has never been a Miss Dodds at the Yancey Academy. Are you feeling all right? And that's the end of the first chapter. So, Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. The summary. Percy Jackson, a main character, is a 12-year-old boy and recent student at Yancey Academy. His life changes dramatically after a school field trip to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Previous field trips did not bode well for Percy after mysterious accidents occur. On this trip, two chaperones lead the group of tweens: Mr. Brunner, the Latin teacher and Percy's favorite, and Miss Dodds, the math teacher. As the group explores the museum, Mr. Brunner approaches Percy and tells him that he holds great promise, leaving Percy confused. After an argument with bully Nancy Bobbitt at the water fountain, Percy is falsely accused of pushing her. Miss Dodds leads Percy deeper into the museum to punish him. As she is demanding a confession for Percy, she transforms into a fury, a mythical creature with bat wings and yellow fangs. Mr. Brunner appears and tosses Percy a ballpoint pen that turns into a bronze sword. Percy swings the sword, striking the monster, and it turns to dust. Dazed by this experience, Percy returns back to the fountain only to discover that, in everyone else's minds, Miss Dodds never exists. Okay, here are some vocab words from the first chapter. Kleptomatic, someone with the urge to steal. So, someone kleptomatic in the book would be someone like Nancy, who was trying to steal something from someone else's purse. Uh, Dyslexia, unable to read. So, like as it said in the book, Percy was dyslexia. He couldn't read and he had trouble reading and learning about things. Still, an ancient stone slab with markings. So, on their field trip, they were looking at steles about Greek and Roman art. So it's just this big stone slab with pictures or markings or words on it. Vaporize, convert it into gas or vapor. So if you remember or read back when Percy slashed at Miss Dodds, she vaporized, which means she converted into gas or vapor. ADHD, condition with behavioral and learning disorders. As I mentioned earlier, Percy is unable to read or learn anything, which means he has ADHD. Disgorge, ejects the content of stomach from the mouth. So disgorging, like as it said in the book, the Titan Kronos disgorge his children. So it could also mean puking, like you disgorge food from your mouth. Okay, snicker, laugh quietly. So as I said in the book, when Percy didn't know the answer to the question, people were snickering behind him, which means they were laughing quietly. A sphinx, a mythical creature with a lion's body and a human head. So if you don't know what it is, you can search it up. But it's just a human head on a lion's body, frayed, worn away, and tattered. So something frayed would be like a jacket who has been worn many times or left out on the street. Something like that would be frayed. A scythe, an edge tool for cutting grass. Again, if you don't know what it is, you can search it up. A scythe. Okay. Metropolitan, relating to an urban area. So like in New York, right? It said Metropolitan Museum of Art, which means it's relating in the urban area of New York. So that's why it's called the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Triumphant, experiencing victory. So if I'm triumphant, right, that means I beat someone else in a game or I won at something. Promising, to have a successful outcome or have a good chance. A, a promising outcome would be an outcome that I would most likely win. Like for instance, if I only needed 1 point to win compared to my opponent who needs 6 points to win, I have a promising chance to win. Okay, so the element I'm going to be teaching you guys today is the point of view. So the first person point of view is in the point of view of the speaker. This is where the book uses words I, me. Like in the book, it says I like to read, which means you're in the narrator's point of view, which is the first person point of view. The second person point of view is the reader is part of the story, which you are the reader. So it says you are walking down the road, which means you are part of the story, which means the narrator is you. So it uses words like you, we. Third person point of view is the point of view from an outsider. Like outside, like you are not part of the story, you are not in the story, you are just outside of the story, watching and reading the events. Like he likes to ride his bike, which means, or he is playing basketball. You are reading the story from an outsider point of view, which uses words like he, she, him, they. Percy Jackson is written in first point of view using words such as me and I. Even though it uses words such as you, it is not second person point of view because he breaks something called the fourth wall, which means he's able to speak to the reader. So the fourth wall is doing or saying something that implies that the narrator is speaking to the reader. Like as an example, but if you recognize yourself in these pages, if you feel something stirring inside, stop reading immediately. So he's talking to you, saying that if you see yourself in the pages, stop reading, which means he's communicating to you, the reader. Even though even though the book uses you in the book, it is not second person because you are not part of the story. Percy is talking to you, which means he breaks the fourth wall, but you're still in the point of the narrator and the speaker, which is first person. So that's all for today. And yeah, next time I'll be covering the second chapter of Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief and another element in the book. So thank you.